and welcome to Highway, which this week comes from the Norfolk Broads. The hectic holiday season is over, and as the area regains its calm and tranquility, what better place to reflect on the beauty of the autumn season?
The leaves of life have turned to gold, and yet my friends don't look too old. I've still so many things to do, more lovely days to spend with you. As autumn leaves go floating by, and swallows fill the evening sky, these precious things I've seen before, but now I enjoy them more. When autumn starts to paint the leaves, they say it's time to take your ease. And as the leaves take wing, my heart wants to sing. The grass has never looked so green, a sky so blue I've never seen. Though time like wine may fill the cup, it tastes too good to drink right up. One thing I know for sure is true, all my horizons still look new. The world's a stage, I've learned my part, to stay forever young in heart.
In the Middle Ages, East Anglia was one of the most populated parts of Britain. The forests had all been cleared, so the local people dug out the rich beds of peat for fuel. In later years, the diggings flooded and formed a series of lakes linked by winding rivers, which now make up the unique broadland landscape. The many fine Norman churches are clear evidence of the former prosperity of the area. St Helen's Church at Ranworth is known as the Cathedral of the Broads, and from its tower there's a spectacular view across the reed beds and waterways that are part of this beautiful parish. The present vicar of Ranworth is Philip McFadden. Philip, this church is known as the Cathedral of the Broads, isn't it? Why is that?
Well, as you can see, it's a sumptuous building with a very fine tower, which a lot of people climb. We have about 40,000 visitors a year coming here just to see such a beautiful place.
How old is it?
Well, nearly everything you see is 15th century. There was a massive refit in the 15th century. The screen, the service book, and the lectern that we have here.
Now, they're three famous features of
Very
the church.
famous.
Can you take us through them?
Yeah, certainly. The screen's probably the most famous in England. Beautifully painted. As you can see, it's got the 12 apostles on the bottom and local saints either side. In fact, the right-hand altar was a very famous place in the Middle Ages. People came especially to pray about childbirth.
Did they?
There's lots of babies on that side.
Yeah. But there's also a ghost story attached to it, isn't there?
Well, the screen isn't finished, and because of the rival establishment across the water, St Benet's Abbey, it's said that a monk from there came to paint the screen. I don't believe it myself, but he never quite finished it anyway.
Tell us about the book.
The book is wonderful. It's probably unique in that it was made for this church, and we still have it here. It's got fabulous illuminated miniatures, about 30 of them. There's one, for instance, of a group of singers standing round our lectern here singing, another of medieval musicians playing the sort of instruments they did in those days, and a very famous one of Jonah being gobbled up by the whale.
Your job as vicar of Ranworth also entails the ministering to the holidaymakers, doesn't it?
That's right, yes. Well, having so many visitors, a good many of them moor in the Broad overnight, and it's very full on a Saturday. So we have a church boat, and we visit them individually, welcoming them to the village and inviting them to come to church. And we quite often have over 100 people here on a Sunday.
Because you're very close, about 100 yards from
Yes,
the
it's
Broad,
just a step up. And people come as they are in their deck shoes and life jackets.
That was the Norwich Waits playing a piece of early English music called Watkins Ale. Now, in those days, transport in broadlands was mainly by pack horse and sailing boat. And even in today's motorised age, there's no more restful way of travelling these tranquil waterways. The traditional cargo vessel of the Broads is a Norfolk wherry. Right up until the First World War, wherries were the main means of transporting heavy loads around the area. The stone for the great buildings of the region, like Norwich Cathedral, was all brought in by boat. Sadly today, only one of the black sail cargo wherries remains afloat. The boat I'm sailing on is a pleasure wherry called Hartor, and my skipper is Peter Bauer. Peter, why is this boat so suitable for the Broads?
Evolution, I think, is the answer to that. Over the, 200 or 300 years, we've ended up with a boat, very shallow draft, so it can go up some of the shallower waterways and so on, and with a sail and a rig that enables it to sail in the very narrow parts of the Broads, go under the bridges easily. There's a 1.5 tons of lead on the bottom of the mast, so that comes down ever so easily. And they could go just about anywhere in any conditions on the rivers of the North Broads.
And it's very manoeuvrable, that's the point, isn't it?
Yes, as long as it's not blowing too hard.
Now, this boat's named after an Egyptian goddess,
That's right,
Hathor.
yeah.
What's the story behind it?
Well, she was built for two sisters, Coleman sisters, out in Mustard, and they had a younger brother, Alan, and he was suffering from delicacy of the lungs, what we'd call TB now.
Yeah.
and they shipped him off to Egypt, the idea being that the dry air there in those days they thought would help make him better. It didn't, and his dying wish was to see something of the Nile. And apparently most of the family were out there too, and they went on this boat on the Nile called the Dahaba Hathor, which was one of the Egyptian sailing boats on the Nile. And when they were moored at Luxor in the late 1890s, Alan Coleman died. And 7 years later, when his sisters were having a wherry, Norfolk wherry commission for the family use, they decided to have it done in memory of him, hence the name Hathor.
So what's the attraction in renovating and sailing these boats?
There's not much attraction in renovation until they, well, it's the finished product you're looking at.
Of course, yeah.
Sailing them, well, I don't want to sail anything else. I think it's so nice because you can still find parts of the Broads that are peaceful and quiet, and to slip along in a light breeze. You can shut your eyes, or you can open your eyes and look around and go back 50, 100 years, perhaps even 200 years. And it makes you at one with the river and the county.
And that's what you like about the Broads yourself?
Yes, I like everything about the Broads. It's silly pretending that you know, the Broads would be lovely if there were no people here, because the holiday makers are the bread and butter of the area. And I think the really nice thing is to get people on here and to see them enjoy being on here and enjoy the Broads from a boat like this.
With the increasing amount of leisure time available to people, the Broads are coming under great pressure. As well as offering a wide range of recreational attractions, the area has a unique wildlife, as in the centre of rich farmland. Maintaining a balance between these conflicting demands is a difficult task and is the responsibility of the Broads Authority. Richard Partington is their countryside officer. Richard, what's the role of the Broads Authority?
Well, it's rather like a national park authority. We've got a threefold role, really. That's to conserve and enhance the natural beauty of the Broads, to allow and to promote the enjoyment of the Broads by the general public, and lastly, to protect the interests of navigation. That's the open access on the rivers.
So, what are you doing to improve and maintain the area?
Well, we've had a long history, over 10 years of history of experimental management, which we're trying to improve the principal problem, and that's that of water quality. And where we are now, here at Cockshoot Broad, we started to pump out the mud, the phosphate-enriched mud, from the bottom of the Broads, which, as you can see around us, almost miraculously, the water plants have started to recover.
It is. Great difference between here and over there.
It certainly is. Yes, it certainly is.
Richard, I suppose your difficulty is to make the place accessible to visitors without destroying the area.
Yes, it's always a problem in terms of these natural areas. What we try to do is to blend careful management of particular honeypots where people arrive by boat and cars, and careful blending of the uses in those places. Also, one of the things that we're trying to do is to encourage green tourism or soft tourism, where members of the public can come without actually destroying the habitat that they're trying to do. We did embark upon a Broads promotional campaign to try and influence people's attitudes before they actually arrived here. And of course, working with schools and educational institutions to work with environmental education. It's a big thing for
It's very important to get the children to appreciate their background and their environment, isn't it?
It is.
Because otherwise they grow up not knowing anything about it.
That's right. We think that working with the children, and at least working with the educators that educate children, certainly makes the money go a little bit further in that sense. It is extremely important that they do appreciate their natural environment.
One establishment that is doing much to educate people about the Broadland environment is the How Hill Residential Centre. Formerly part of the local education authority, it is now open to all, young and old. Although still offering many environmental courses for schools, How Hill has become increasingly popular as a place for groups to come and benefit from the beauty and quiet there is here.
When you come to the end of a perfect day and you sit alone with your thoughts while the chimes ring out with a carol gay for the joy that the day has brought. Do you think what the end of a perfect day can mean to a tired heart? When the sun goes down with a flaming ray and the dear friends have to part. Well, this is the end of a perfect day, near the end of a journey too. But it leaves a thought that is big and strong, with a wish that is kind and true. For memory has painted this perfect day with colors that never fade, and we find at the end of a perfect day the soul of a friend we've made.
Ian Wallace, a regular visitor to the Broads for over 30 years, singing A Perfect Day. Someone else who's been coming here for over 30 years is Roy Elson. Roy, you're chairman of an organisation called Camps Furthest Out. Tell us its history.
Well, it started in America in 1930 when its founder, Glenn Clark, had a vision when he was actually on the farthest out island from Maine, USA, and he was running a camp, conference at that time, and he had this vision of something better for the Christians who were attending, something which would feed the body, mind and soul. That developed from there into the program we now have, and in 1954 it actually reached this country. It has actually gone now into 30 different countries around the world.
It's interdenominational, isn't it?
It's completely interdenominational, and it's open to Christians who want to grow in faith and in their grace in their daily lives, develop their prayer life. It all develops from our program that's been designed especially to build them up.
And you don't advertise, do you? It's all word of mouth.
It's all completely through the relationship you have one with the other.
So why did you choose the Broads for one of your retreats?
That was interesting because we came up the River Ant down here one day sailing, and we were talking about finding a venue in East Anglia. And as we came round the bend of the river, we saw this beautiful place here on the hill, the thatched mansion just overlooking the Broads, and we said what a wonderful peaceful spot that would be for one of our retreats. And so we took it from there, and we were able to come here, and we've been here for about 12 years now.
Beautiful spot, isn't it?
It's beautiful, and it couldn't be more ideal for what we need, for the peacefulness of it, and for the development of our ideas of the Lord's creation.
Could you take us through what happens here on a weekend?
Yes, we have speakers who come who really speak from the word of the Lord, but they show how it affects their daily lives. So it takes it right down to the grassroots. You're not just talking about theology, you're applying it to everything about your daily life. And that then we share in worship and prayer throughout the day. It's a balanced program to feed the body, mind and soul.
So the people go away from here refreshed, you'd say?
They go back into their churches completely built up, and that's the whole idea, because we're not trying to take people from church. This isn't a strange cult. It's a Christian activity. It's an organism. It's not an association. You can't join it. You can't pay a subscription. You just come and you grow and you go back to your church, to your family, your work, a stronger and better Christian.
Wordsworth's daffodils, tossing their heads in sprightly dance, were small-time performers compared with Norfolk's graceful reeds, however delightful their setting in the green vistas of Lakeland. Today, as I looked out to a fringe of marsh where tree shadows formed a dark backdrop and sunlight flooded an open area in front, some well-spaced reeds held the stage and displayed their perfect freedom of movement as the wind swirled about them. They looked for all the world like human dancers, swaying, writhing, bowing and thrusting. At times their gestures were those of a group of African braves leaning forward with leveled spears. Then there were naiads rising from a pool with tresses flying in an abandon of feminine grace and pale arms pointing to the heavens. They sprang and stood still, like ballet dancers on tiptoe, assuming classical postures only to pass into the wild whirling of a melee of dervishes as an eddy struck them. There were moments when the stiff leaves streaked out horizontally and trembled or shuddered in a streaming breeze. And sometimes they fluttered like flags in the hand of a signaller with a military rhythm. The only music accompanying the reed dancers was their own whispering as they touched crisply in passing, and a faint murmuration of wind in the willows nearby. But the scene conjured up a sweetness of wandering harmonies in the mind, of flutes and panpipes and soft crooning voices, of drums in the jungle and pibrochs in the hills, while I came to see in every ecstasy of the dancers before me a parallel in human grace, expressing the freedom of spirit that lies within us all.
Michael Goff reading The Dancing Reeds by the late Ted Ellis, well-known conservationist and naturalist of the Broads. The great beauty of the Norfolk reeds can also be seen in many of the area's buildings. Norfolk reed thatch has a reputation all over the country, and marshmen like Eric Edwards carry on a tradition that goes back centuries. Eric, what's involved in looking after and harvesting the reed?
Well, we cut reed in the winter time, from about Christmas till about the first week in April. And we always cut on a double whale, which means it's cut every 2 years. And I do it sometimes the old-fashioned ways, mostly with a little machine nowadays, though. But I like the old ways of cutting reed with the old-fashioned side.
Hard work, though, isn't it?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's ice and old wind frost.
But you've got a great collection of implements.
Yes, this is the collection I've gradually built up for the children, mainly. And these are a pair of boots, reed boots.
They're beautiful, aren't
Yeah, they tell me there could be roughly about 1900.
Really?
Yes.
90-year-old boots?
Yes, they're all handmade.
God.
They're all beautiful.
Beautiful leather, isn't it?
Beautiful leather, yes. And I idolise those.
I bet. Do you wear them at all?
No, I don't. I just bring them to see it for the children, really.
Yeah.
It's basically all the stuff is for the children.
Children like it, do they?
Yes.
They like to come and see the old
Yes.
implements.
Yes, I mean, there's an old didle here. They like the didle. It's for getting mud out of the dike, so I don't use it now, but you would put it into the dike and the mud would go in there and the water would run through, you see.
And just whip it out.
And pull it out.
It's all heavy work, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
But this is the most important, I think, that it's the old-fashioned side that you cut reed with. That's an old boil.
Yes.
And that's a pricker. And as you mow, you see, you swing your scythe round, it cuts, it hits the boil and hits the pricker and comes round.
Oh, I see.
But it's still, I still use it.
Do you?
I like to keep my hand in.
Now, could you take us through the life of a marshman? It's a hard life being a marshman, isn't it?
Yes, well, winter time, it's basically cutting reed for about 4 months, till about April. And then, as I say, day to day, children come across and see me, perhaps twice a week. Then I get the paths ready after cutting the reed, all the paths are cut. And then I go into Marne sedge, which is another thatching material, which is the green stuff. It goes on for the ridging.
Yeah.
And I mow that all by hand, sedge. And quite a big demand for sedge. And then the end month, sort of December, I start to clean the dikes out and get ready for the reed season again. I love sort of Marne reeding, and you get the bearded tits feeding at your feet, actually.
Yeah.
And you see the harriers flying about. Wildlife works around you, really. They see you every day. I mean, I come across them with a little boot, and then it's so peaceful this side. It's a gorgeous spot, really.
Just a few miles from Hull Hill are the ruins of one of the oldest religious settlements in East Anglia. Records show that a Benedictine monastery existed at St Benet's Abbey before the Norman conquest. For over 500 years, the monks lived, worked and prayed at this isolated spot on the banks of the River Bure. Although the last monk left in the 16th century, the bishops of Norwich still carry the title of Abbot of St Benet's, bestowed on them by Henry VIII. Every year, the abbot arrives on the first Sunday in August to hold an outdoor service and maintain an active religious tradition going back nearly 1,000 years. But for most of the year, the abbey is empty. The cross of oak from the royal estate at Sandringham, which stands guard over this calm haven, summarises for me the spirit of the Broads. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old cross where the dearest and best for the world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. To the old rugged cross I will ever be true, its shame and reproach gladly bear. Then he'll call me someday to my home far away, where his glory forever I'll share. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. In the old rugged cross, stained with blood so divine, a wondrous beauty I see. For 'twas on that old cross Jesus suffered and died to pardon and sanctify me. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Well, I'm afraid that's the end of a voyage around the Norfolk Broads, but next week we shall be visiting another waterway, this time the one that divides Devon from Cornwall, River Tamar. I'll see you then.